Your bad habits aren't the problem, your replacements are. Here's what nobody talks about: most people try to quit a bad habit cold turkey, and that's exactly why they fail. Your brain doesn't do well with empty space. It needs something to fill the gap, and if you don't give it something intentional, it'll drag you right back to what it knows. Think about it like a worn path through a field. Every time you do a habit, you're walking that same trail. It gets deeper, clearer, easier to follow. Quitting doesn't erase the path. It just means you keep accidentally wandering back to it because it's still right there. This is the core of what researchers call habit loop theory, and Charles Duhigg laid it out clearly in his book The Power of Habit. Every habit has three parts: a cue, a routine, and a reward. Most people try to attack the routine. But the real leverage is understanding what reward your brain is actually chasing. Let's say you stress eat every night around 9 p.m. You probably think the habit is eating chips or scrolling DoorDash. It's not. The habit is soothing anxiety. The food is just the tool your brain learned to use, and until you give it a different tool, it's going to keep reaching for the same one. Here's where it gets wild. A 2012 MIT study found that the habit loop never actually disappears from your brain. Even years after you stop a behavior, the neural pathway is still there, waiting. Which means willpower alone will always be a losing battle. You're not fighting a choice. You're fighting a groove worn into your brain matter. So the strategy isn't elimination. It's substitution, and the substitution has to deliver a similar reward, or your brain will reject it like a bad organ transplant. This is why people who replace alcohol with sparkling water fail, but people who replace alcohol with intense exercise sometimes actually succeed. Same anxiety relief. Different method. Okay, so how do you actually figure out what reward you're chasing? James Clear talks about this and it's brilliant. For 1 week, every time the urge hits, write down how you're feeling before you do the habit. Bored, anxious, lonely, tired, overwhelmed. After 7 days, you'll see a pattern so clear it'll almost be embarrassing how obvious it is. Most bad habits come down to 6 emotional triggers: boredom, stress, loneliness, fatigue, procrastination, and social pressure. 6. That's it. Once you know which one owns you, you can start building a replacement that actually targets the same need instead of just hoping discipline will carry you through. But here's a question worth sitting with: have you ever actually identified your trigger, or have you just been fighting the behavior in the dark? Because most people skip this step and then wonder why they've tried to quit the same habit 14 times and nothing sticks. The audit is the work. Don't skip it. Now let's talk about replacement design, because this is where most people get it wrong in a really specific way. They pick replacements that are too hard. You're stressed, your cue fires, and your replacement is a 45-minute meditation session. Your brain is going to laugh at you and open Netflix. The replacement has to be easier than the bad habit at first. B.J. Fogg at Stanford calls this making the new behavior tiny. Start so small your brain can't say no. If you want to replace late-night scrolling with reading, don't commit to 30 pages. Commit to opening the book. That's it. Opening it. Momentum builds from completion, not from ambition, and your brain rewards itself just for following through on something small. Here's the thing about timing that almost nobody mentions: you have a window after a cue fires where your brain is most open to a new response. It's roughly 3 to 5 seconds. After that, the old pathway starts pulling hard. So your replacement behavior needs to be decided, practiced, and ready to go before the cue ever hits. You can't wing this in the moment. This is why environment design is honestly more powerful than motivation. If your cue is walking into the kitchen at night, and your bad habit lives in that kitchen, you need to change what you encounter the second you walk in. Put the fruit on the counter. Move the chips to a high shelf. Make the bad option slightly harder and the good option slightly easier. Small friction adds up to massive results. Here's where it gets wild. Researchers at the University of Southern California found that up to 43% of what we do every single day is habit, not conscious choice. Nearly half your life is running on autopilot. That's not a metaphor. That means the habits you're building or ignoring right now are literally designing almost half of your future daily experience. The replacement also has to be something you can do in the same context as the old habit, which trips people up constantly. If you always smoke on your work break outside, you can't replace that with going to the gym. You're not at a gym, you're outside at work. The replacement has to fit the scene. Some people replace the cigarette with a short walk around the building, deep breathing, or even just holding something cold. Same location, different action. Now let's talk about the first 66 days, because you've probably heard 21 days and that number is almost completely made up. A University College London study tracked habit formation across 96 people and found the average time for a behavior to become truly automatic was 66 days, and for some people it was close to 254. There's no shortcut. But knowing this actually helps, because you stop feeling like you're failing when day 22 still feels hard. So what do you do when you slip? Because you will slip. That's not pessimism, that's biology. The research on this is actually pretty reassuring though. A 2010 study found that missing one day had zero statistical impact on long-term habit formation. One slip doesn't break the chain. The dangerous part isn't slipping once, it's the story you tell yourself about that slip and whether it gives you permission to quit entirely. This is called the "what the hell" effect, and it's been studied extensively in the context of dieting, but it applies to every habit change you'll ever attempt. You have one cookie, you decide the diet's ruined, you eat 17 more cookies. The habit didn't kill you. The narrative did. So when you slip, your only job is to get back on the routine as fast as possible, same day if you can, next day at the absolute latest. Here's a question that'll make this click differently. What if the bad habit is also giving you something genuinely valuable, like social connection, stimulation, or relief from pain? Because then the real problem isn't the habit. It's that you have an unmet need and the habit is the only thing currently meeting it. Replacing the behavior without addressing the need is just moving the symptom around. This is why habit replacement has to be honest. Not aspirational, not motivational poster honest, brutally, uncomfortably honest. What is this habit giving me that I'm not getting anywhere else? For a lot of people, the answer is rest. They scroll because they're exhausted and have never given themselves permission to just do nothing. The replacement isn't an app. It's scheduled rest. Real rest. Without guilt. Let's talk about identity for a second, because this is the part that makes everything else stick or fall apart. If you're trying to stop eating junk food but you still think of yourself as someone who eats junk food, you will always feel like you're fighting against yourself. The replacement habit only becomes permanent when it starts to feel like something you just do, not something you're trying to do. James Clear's framing on this is sharp. Every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to be. When you do the replacement behavior even once, you've cast a vote. When you do it consistently, you've started to build a case. And at some point, your brain stops seeing it as discipline and starts seeing it as identity. That's the goal. That's when it actually becomes easy. But here's where it gets wild with identity. People who said, "I don't smoke," quit smoking at significantly higher rates than people who said, "I'm trying to quit smoking." One study found the "I don't" framing worked roughly twice as well as "I can't." The language you use to describe yourself to yourself is not soft psychology. It directly shapes behavior. Change the label, and you slowly change the loop. You also need accountability, but not in the way most people set it up. Telling your friends, "Hey, I'm trying to be healthier," is so vague it provides almost zero accountability pressure. The research shows specific, measurable, time-bound commitment with real social stakes is what actually moves behavior. Tell someone exactly what you're replacing, exactly how often, and exactly what happens if you don't follow through. One of the most underrated tools for habit replacement is tracking, not to celebrate streaks, but to build self-awareness. When you can see your own pattern on paper or on a screen, your brain starts to treat it differently. It becomes data about you rather than just something that happens to you, and that small psychological shift gives you leverage you can't get from motivation alone, because motivation is a feeling and feelings come and go. Now here is the honest part about timeline expectations that most habit content glosses over completely. The first 2 weeks feel impossible because the cue fires and the reward from the new behavior is weaker than the old one, the dopamine hasn't caught up yet. Weeks 3 through 6 feel inconsistent, kind of good, kind of not. Week 7 and beyond is where the replacement starts to feel natural. If you quit before week 7, you never made it to the part where it gets easier. Let's also address the biggest lie in self-help, that you need to be consistent every single day or it doesn't count. That's not how habits work neurologically. What matters is frequency over time, not perfection. 5 days out of 7 for 3 months builds a stronger habit than 7 days out of 7 for 3 weeks. Sustainability always beats intensity. Always. The tortoise was right, and everyone who builds habits knows it. Here's a practical system to actually put this together right now. Spend 3 days observing your habit without judging it, identify the emotional trigger behind it, design a replacement that delivers a similar reward with less cost, make the replacement stupidly easy, and engineer your environment so the bad option has slightly more friction than the new one. That's the whole framework. It's not complicated, it's just not comfortable. The last thing worth saying is this: you are not your bad habits, but you are the person who has to decide to change them, and that decision isn't a one-time thing. It's a daily, sometimes hourly recommitment, especially in the early weeks. The people who succeed at this aren't people with more willpower. They're people who built better systems and gave themselves permission to be imperfect inside those systems while still showing up. 3 things to lock in before you close this video. Your habit has a reward your brain won't give up without a replacement. The replacement must match the emotional need, not just the behavior. An identity change is what makes the new habit permanent. Not discipline, not streaks, not willpower. Drop this in the comments right now. What's the one habit you've tried to quit more than twice, and what reward do you think it's actually giving you?